Welcome to sunny Philadelphia, birthplace of America, home to Independence Hall, the Liberty Bell, and of course the occasional rowdy Phillies fan. But that's not why we're here today. We are headed to the University of Pennsylvania Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology in search for the world's oldest human skull. Let's go see what this 3 million year old relic has to say, shall we? Call me crazy, but I can't help but think the skull is in that chopper. I gotta be honest with you, just being here makes me feel like I did something with my life. It looks like some kind of Masonic temple, like it's housing the Holy Grail. Although I guess you could say that this skull is the Holy Grail of human remains. Now I'm about ready to talk to Dr. Keith Mason, who's the curator here at the University of Penn, and hopefully he can shed some light on this mysterious skull, and if they actually have it, we can take a look at it. Now, I probably can't go in through this entrance because I only got 1,000 on my SATs, so I should probably cut through the back. I'll see you around the other side. Question for you. I heard rumor that you had an ancient skull here called the Table Mountain skull. Do you know anything about that? I heard it got shipped here from the National History Museum. So I managed to slip past security. Well, our journey has brought us to Egypt because it appears that they cannot find Dr. Mason. I don't know what's harder to find, a 40-year-old curator or a 3 million year old skull. Maybe a singles bar? When we think of the origins of man, we think of Africa. No better place than Egypt, home of the pharaohs, the Sphinx, and the gods. It's hard to imagine that halfway across the world, a skull could totally change the way we see our history. So we're getting a little warmer. Besides the fact that there's no air conditioning in here, we are in the North American exhibit. Now this is where the 3 million year old skull was found, in Table Mountain, California. And it turns out that a few coal miners were digging 2,000 feet below the ground when they found the skull. Famed geologist J.D. Whitney came across the skull in the 1860s and made it his life's work to prove the authenticity of the 3 million year old skull. And this trip took him to Harvard, to Chicago, and yes, even here in Philadelphia, where we believe the skull is housed today. So we looked through all the exhibits that we could find, and there was no sign of the skull. Now, we are in the wing of the museum archives. Hopefully we can get some more answers here.
Nice to meet you. Dr. Keith Mason.
Pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Mr. Nadu.
All right, so we have been on a scavenger hunt of sorts, looking for the Table Mountain skull.
Yes.
What can you tell me about it?
Oh, the Table Mountain skull actually was found by a Dr. J.D. Whitney in 1866.
No relation to J.C. Whitney, Tiger?
And he actually found this skull that he found it with a lot of petrified fossilized remains in a mine shaft in Table Mountain, California.
What makes a skull so unique? And how are you able to tell if it's 3 million years old or if it's 1,000 years old?
Okay.
How do you know somebody just didn't get it out of a graveyard, anywhere?
Well, I wouldn't be worth my weight in salt as a curator if I didn't know that, right? We actually did not carbon date the skull. We carbon dated the petrified remains of the earth that was attached to the skull.
And there was like gravel and stuff from the mine shaft that were in there, correct?
Yes. And that is how we were able to carbon date it to 3 million years ago.
Okay.
We'll definitely bring in a controversy, the origins of the human race.
Yeah, I can imagine some people aren't happy with that.
Well, yes.
All right, so enough talk about the origins. Where is this skull? I'm dying to take a look.
Yeah, the problem with that, Mr. Nadu, is that the skull actually was lost in transportation from the Pennsylvania Museum of Natural History to here. Right now, it's kind of inconclusive where it is.
Well, first of all, that's why you use Amazon Prime. Second of all, so what's your next step now? How do you recover something like that?
Well,
I mean, it seems kind of ironic that something that's going to turn the scientific community on its head is now out of reach for the population to say.
Well, the proper authorities have been notified, and we are currently in the process of tracking it down.
Okay, so where does that leave us? Do you have any of the tools or any of the petrified wood that was found in the vicinity of where the skull was?
Actually, the rest of the fossilized remains of that actual site are still in California. We were just dealing with the transportation of the skull.
Okay, so we came the whole way from California to Philadelphia just to go back to California.
I'm sorry.
All right, well, we appreciate your time.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you so
It's
much.
very rare that people are interested in anthropology and archaeology. Thank you very much.
Well, just a heads up, if you actually put a skull that's 3 million years old on display, maybe more people would come. All right, take care. Vote here for your favorite museum object. Table Mountain skull, Table Mountain skull. No Table Mountain skull. That's a shame. As a Philadelphia sports fan, I can't say my city hasn't let me down before. Maybe Mason's telling the truth, maybe he's not. But to UC Berkeley bound we are, but not before I get a beer and a cheesesteak.